following program is classified G. It's suitable for all ages. We would like to remind our viewers that the views expressed in this program by our participating guests are solely viewpoints of them who take part and does not reflect the views and beliefs of the Derana Media Network. This is an opinion-based program.
On an all-new Get Real, a fiscal story and the COVID bump. Sri Lanka's economic trajectory at the beginning of 2020 aimed to soar high up in the sky. But as we all know, COVID pulled all that back to the ground. With a heavy burden on the nation's economy now mostly hammered by COVID expenses, the future looks a bit bleak, with the government moving towards ensuring that the economy keeps running despite the health concerns. Many are now questioning, is this the right move? Can Sri Lanka weather both the crisis simultaneously, economic and health, and come out unscathed? For insights and analysis, tonight I'm honored to welcome the State Minister of Money and Capital Markets, Ajith Nivad Cabraal.
From Studio 24, with opinions that matter, it's time to get real with Mahieash Johnney.
And a happy Monday evening to all. Welcome to yet another episode of Get Real, where we discuss issues that affects you and me. While the country is now barely out of travel restrictions, hopefully this will last with a bit of better behavior from you and me. Not forgetting that the country is still suffering from COVID and we still have a high daily new count of infections. It's vital that we still ensure we don't become a burden to this nation by acting irresponsibly. Of course, you don't have to explain to me the hardships of not having an everyday life, a normal life, at least the way it was before. Well, then again, what is normal? The definition of normal keeps changing every day. We must not fall sick to this virus. It's essential that we all take care of ourselves, wearing our mask, washing our hands, avoiding unnecessary gatherings or meetings, and ensuring that we keep our distance. We all are in this together. So tonight's conversation is naturally about Sri Lanka and the country's economy. Just like over 250,000 people became victims of COVID-19, the economy too was part of it. At the beginning of 2020, we all had high hopes that this country will soar like an eagle high up in the sky. Only to COVID-19 got us down. Now, are we really down? Fortunately, touch wood, this country hasn't seen economic woes like how many other countries in the region and in the world has seen during these days due to COVID. However, an alarm was set off by members of the government itself, stating the current economic trajectory is a bit bleak as our coffers are empty. None other than Cabinet Minister of Energy Udaya who was here last week and had this to say. Listen in.
We are heading for a disaster. We like it or not. We should. Different people have different views. Some people think no, we should not upset the nation. We should not make the people unhappy. We should not make the people frightened. But in my case, I think politicians should always communicate with the nation with the truth, nothing but the truth. Then only people will have a confidence on us. Then only they will adjust their lifestyle. When they know, if they know we are in a crisis, they will adjust themselves. But if you paint a very rosy picture, then they will complain, look, we are having hardships, we can't maintain our lifestyle, bring us some comfort. So we should tell the bitter truth to the people. That's what I strongly believe. That's what I am doing at the moment.
Well, that was Minister of Energy Udaya who was here last week, and he had a lot of good things to say about what the government is doing as well. So tonight, I want to engage in a discussion and ask the relevant people responsible, where's the economic health of this nation heading? What's going on here? Are we okay? For that, I've invited State Minister of Money and Capital Markets, Ajith Nivad Cabraal, who will join us shortly. But before that, standing by is Nivad, who's here tonight with the real story. Nivad.
Mahieash, the Sri Lankan government is at a critical junction as it faces mounting pressure from the pandemic. Its fiscal plan has been brought into public debate constantly. The pandemic caused a decline in the overall size of the Sri Lankan economy to $80.7 billion in 2020 from $84 billion in 2019. In spite of an overall contraction, the economy began to show strong signs of recovery during the second half of 2020, responding to the pro-growth policy initiatives across the fiscal and monetary policy fronts. The budget deficit rose to 11.1% of GDP in 2020, and it is most likely to be over 12% of GDP this year in the backdrop of revenue shortfalls caused by pandemic-hit economic activities. The government, on the advice of the central bank, is determined to avoid seeking financial assistance from the IMF to overcome the balance of payments difficulties. The central bank continues to deny assistance from the IMF, arguing that the conditionalities attached to such assistance are not compatible with the government's homegrown alternative economic policy strategy.
Inflows through certain financial sources, short as well as long term, have been pursued. Commitment to maintain the country's untainted debt repayment record is the commitment, is an undertaking which the central bank takes up with confidence.
The fuel price hike made this month, a move that can give more revenue to the government and reduce money printing to bring some stability to the currency. Sri Lanka has $29 billion in foreign currency debt obligations that are due between now and 2026, against foreign exchange reserves of $4.5 billion as of the end of April 2021. The outstanding external debt of the country, which is a key concern of sovereign rating agencies, declined to $49.2 billion at the end of 2020 from $54.8 billion at end of 2019.
The government's fiscal policy has been clear from day one, and that means it has particularly looked at stimulating the economy, which had a decline over a 5-year period, and as a result of that decline, the government brought in a fiscal policy framework that ensures business is given first priority. The government has sent a strong message to the local manufacturing sector and local entrepreneurs to step up to ensure that they contribute to the economic growth and transform this economy from a import-driven economy to a production economy. So the budget deficits have been increased not only in Sri Lanka, across the globe. If you look at the US and UK, the US budget deficit for 2020 is 18% of GDP. The UK budget deficit is about 12.5%, 13% of GDP. Debt has been the talk of the town for quite some time. So if you look at our debt composition, we have inherited a rather bleak debt composition because we borrowed about $12.5 billion in the last 5 years. That is from 2015 to 2019. We went outside of Sri Lanka and we borrowed $12.5 billion, which comprises about 75% of our total external debt borrowings. No one talks about that now. But that's the legacy item that has to be dealt with. Now, how do you deal with this? Obviously, you have to ensure that there are significant strong cash flows to service this debt, and that is precisely what this policy framework is trying to address.
Travel and tourism, an important driver of the economy, has been hit hard and the outlook for recovery remains uncertain. The direct contribution of tourism to the pre-pandemic GDP was about 4%, but the indirect contribution was much higher. Tourist arrivals in the first 5 months of 2021 were 97% lower than the same period last year. The Port City project has been the latest most crucial investment opportunity that the country has opened up under the leadership of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. The project expects an overall investment of $15 billion. The president has suggested that the government has an ambitious plan to unleash a decade of transformational and rapid economic growth to double Sri Lanka's national output to $8,000 per capita GDP by 2030.
The government of Sri Lanka is proactive and pro-businesses. We will look very favorably upon investments that can have a transformative impact on our economy as well as our national profile. And we will do our utmost to create an enabling environment for the success of such investments. We now stand amidst a national transformation process that will not only uplift Sri Lanka, but have a positive impact on the entire region while creating tremendous value for investors across multiple sectors and through diverse instruments.
The government plans on making the current hardships a short-term experience for the general populace as it works hard to get the country up and running. Over to you, Mahieash.
All right, hopefully things will become better as time moves on. I'm reporting there with the real story. Thank you very much. We're going to take a short commercial break, and when we return, State Minister of Money and Capital Markets, Ajith Nivad Cabraal, will be here. You're watching Get Real. We'll be back in a moment. To Get Real, time now to get some context into the discussion we are having today. Sri Lanka's economy, where are we headed right now? As I showed you earlier on, the picture doesn't seem to be that rosy. There is a little bit of uncertainty as to where we are heading and what exactly is happening to the country's economy. So in order to get a clear picture, the policymakers, the decision makers up there, I've invited the State Minister of Money and Capital Markets and State Enterprise Reforms, Mr. Ajith Nivad Cabraal. Welcome, sir, to the program. Thank you very much. This is the first time we're sitting down and having a conversation with regard to a pertinent question right now. Yes, the government says that we're on a right track. The path is correct. We have the Port City project now up and running, and hopefully we will get something from that as well. But the country's debt burden has increased immensely, especially thanks to the Cabraal in the past 5 years, has gone up massively. Now your government, the current government, has to pay this back. Some of them are maturing next year, early next year. So what exactly? So even Cabinet Minister of the government was seated where you were, and he was talking about the fact that there's no dollars in the coffers. The coffers are empty. What's the truth? Are we heading towards a disaster here?
I'll put it like this, Mahieash. See, every economy has certain challenges at any time. There is nothing called a rosy situation at any given time. Always there will be challenges. You've got to meet with it. The situation, as you quite rightly mentioned, was somewhat difficult at the time that we took it over. There was a debt burden which was close to 90%, up from about 70% when the time that we handed over. But all that is water under the bridge. Yeah. You inherit something, you deal with it. And that's the bottom line. I'm not making any excuses about it. We knew what we were getting at, and we were dealing with it. Unfortunately, COVID occurred, and that's another dampener, which is again something which is a given. But at the same time, now we got to deal with it. Now when you deal with a situation where suddenly a substantial part of your foreign exchange earnings are brought down to zero, I'm talking about tourism, receipts of around $4.5 billion suddenly becomes naught, you naturally have a bit of a difficulty in your hands. So I'm not underplaying that. There is some kind of a tension. But at the same time, we have taken the steps that are needed to deal with it. We have stopped imports of vehicles. We have brought in certain controls with regard to the exports, that people have to convert their dollars as fast as possible. So there are a few steps that have been taken which is dealing with this situation. At the same time, there may be some element of time that you take in order that these policies take effect. But I'm confident that given the conditions that we have and the policies that we have put in place and the steps that we are taking, we'll be on top of the situation. We have also opened out new areas of non-debt inflows. You mentioned about the Port City, very right. Yes, now that was a piece of legislation that was delayed for quite some time, but we managed to get it into place, and we are having that. We are also opening out new areas for people to invest in, which means that new investment in non-debt making instruments is now possible for it to come into country. So we do recognize that there is a difficulty. We do recognize that the debt demands are higher than what it was earlier, mainly because I remember when I was a past governor, as you know, then at the time that we handed over government in 2014 end, we had $8 billion in reserves. Thereafter, the Yahapalana government borrowed a net of about $12 billion. So technically, to the 8, if you add the 12, you should have $20 billion in your reserves. But unfortunately, what we inherited was only 7. So naturally, there is a certain tension there, and we got to make ends meet with the dollars that we have. So there may be some element of tension in the dollar market, but that also we are managing, and we are confident that given the next few months, that this also will come back to a normal situation. And when the country opens out, that also will be helpful. As you know, we had kept the country closed for 66 days last year. This year also about 40 days of closure. All that didn't help either. But I'm confident that with the new steps that we are taking, as well as the country opening out, and the possibility of the vaccinations taking effect very quickly, and then the possibility of having the tourism reawakened, we should get back to near normalcy soon.
What's the trajectory here, sir? Because I'm sure you all are thinking long term, not just the 5 years you're going to sit in the government. You might be on these projects that you're initiating, like the port cities, like 30 or 40 or 50 year investment, trying to make sure that we create the market in Sri Lanka, and Sri Lanka to get a name as an investment hub like Singapore or Dubai. Now, what is the trajectory here? Because the picture that we are painting to the world, or the world investor, is not confident for them in order to come and put their money here.
To be very frank, I must say that situation is not what is on the ground. I have had discussions with several investors from all over the world in the recent past, and they do recognize, yes, there is a difficulty right now, but many of them who are investing big time dollars are looking at the long term. They see Sri Lanka as having tremendous potential. They realize that Sri Lanka would not be a stagnant economy. They were used to nearly 8% growth at the time that we were in office the last time. So they believe that we are on target to do this, but they also recognize that there are some times when you do have a difficult patch and you got to ride through that. So my understanding from my discussions with so many people is that yes, we do have some tension right now, but many of the key investors are not looking at the next 3 months. They are looking at 3 years, 10 years ahead. Now, if that is the case, we would see plenty of investment coming in. And I'm confident that that would happen, and that would occur on several fronts. One is the Hambantota port, the Hambantota industrial zone, the pharmaceutical zone, then the port city. All these are potential recipients of investment. It's how we market it, how we have the laws put in place, how we ensure that people who come here don't have to rustify hanging outside various corridors waiting for approvals. So if we get our act together, Mahieash, I'm confident that there'll be plenty of people who will want to invest with us, notwithstanding all what's happening in the rest of the world.
In other countries, I mean, this situation that we are facing right now is not just for Sri Lanka. The whole world is facing COVID, and economies are just collapsing. Trillions of dollars have been wiped up from economies like the best countries in the world. America is seeing trillions of dollars just getting wiped out overnight. Now, what they do is they increase tax. They give the burden back to the people and say, hey, we have to, come and do this together. And they use these taglines, we are all in this together, and try to pinpoint and say, everybody needs to pitch in. But we don't see that here in Sri Lanka. If by any chance we are not raising taxes, but yet the expenses are quite high now. It's doubled now. President recently said around 200 million rupees, I think, rupees or dollars. COVID just took that. That is not calculated at all. So how exactly what's thinking here?
Yeah, that's the challenge. You see, Mahieash, contrary to popular belief, most countries today have reduced their taxes because they don't want to overburden the people who are already struggling. So you can see that there are many countries that have relaxed their tax regimes, and more people are getting more and more breaks. In some countries, in fact, they are giving outright grant of their taxes. They send a check in your mail.
Yeah.
So that's the situation right now as a response to this COVID challenge. At the same time, we also see central banks also printing more money. Again, a challenge which will need to be at some stage pulled back. But those are all strategies that people have used in an unprecedented calamity or a catastrophe. So that's something that we have to have as a one-off. But we shouldn't lose sight of our future goals. You see, it's like somebody who is trying to make his son a doctor or an engineer. He may get ill, or the father might get ill, but you don't lose sight of your overall goal. So we do have that goal in mind, but we also recognize that there is a challenge at the moment and we need to deal with it. So these current policies that we have put in place are essentially, Mahieash, temporary. You got to ride through this situation. And in riding through the situation, quantitative easing will take place at some stage or the other, because people have increased the quantity of money in the economy, and at some stage you'll have to pull it back, and that would also occur at the right time. But right now, at the time that our incomes are weak and our potential for growth are to some extent not as good as what it should be, then at that time you got to ride through. So this is a holding and a ride through period, which I see essentially. But at the same time, we got to maintain our macro fundamentals as best as we can. Last year we had a negative growth of 3.5%. This year also, had we continued with this lockdown, we would have had a serious debacle. That's why people like us, we used to come out and say, look, lives are important, but livelihood is also important. Sometimes if you don't have a livelihood, your life also may not be around for you to do anything. So fortunately, we have had the ability to reopen the country, and I think if we can have the next 6 months on that trajectory, we would probably see a growth once again of around the 4 to 5% mark, which is very good. If we have the 4 to 5% growth this year, then we have a good launching pad for year 2022. And that's what I would really like to see, because we have put the building blocks in place. We have got the laws in place. We have got the fundamental structure undeterred, which is important. If our entire structure was damaged, then it would have been difficult for us to move forward. That's why we looked after the entrepreneurs. We gave them moratoriums. We gave them new loans, even when it was really, really tough. Because if we damage that, then we would have had a serious problem on our hands. So now we didn't damage it. I know there are some who got really rattled, and some are still struggling, especially those who are in the hospitality industry are having a serious issue. But we want to nurse them through. As you know, we gave the moratoriums that were given at the insistence of the government was something like 4,000 billion. It's an extraordinary number. And that was prolonged for first 1 year, and thereafter another 6 months, and there are now demands that are being made to even increase it further, and we'll probably need to look at that quite positively. So now, what does it mean? It means we got to hold people's hand in this period, because we can't let them falter. Now, that's the strategy that the government is taking, and I'm confident that by doing that strategy, we'll be able to have a set of entrepreneurs who are once again reasonably strong to withstand the tensions for the future.
It also begs the question when you say, you need to hold the people's hand. At some point, are you going to let go and start taxing them left, right and center, like what we saw in the Japan government?
No, it's not only the taxation that is important. You got to provide the space for people to invest and reinvest and reinvest. Now, if the taxes are low, we have always seen, and that is confirmed by empirical evidence as well, that more and more people reinvest. And at this particular moment of time, we want the investment.
Are you talking about the local investors or the
local
foreign?
And foreign? Because if the local investors invest, Mahieash, that is the cue for the foreign investors to come in. No foreign investor likes to come into a country and take the risk unless the locals are doing it. They first want to see, okay, what are the locals doing? Are they investing? Are they shying away? Are they frightened? If they are, foreigners will shy away. But if they find that the locals are also gathering momentum, then they will come in. So we want to make sure that the locals have that ability to invest, and that will come only if they are also given the space to invest. So we have absolutely no intention of taxing them dry. We want them to have the money in their hands, and we want them to reinvest and reinvest and reinvest. We want to give them the ability to invest as well. There must be potential in the economy.
Exactly.
You see, it's like this. If you have a three-wheeler, the most important thing for the man who owns a three-wheeler is the hires. So hires comes from outside.
Yeah.
So if people have no money to go in your three-wheeler, having a three-wheeler is of no use. So people will invest only if they realize that there are others to buy their products and buy their services. Now that arrangement can only be possible if there are more and more people with money in their hands. Now that is what we are attempting to do. One of the biggest mistakes that Yahapalani did was that they sucked the money out of the people, and that meant that they were not able to spend either. We are not making that mistake. We are having a tension, no doubt, but at the same time, we want them to have the money in their hands so that they will spend, they will invest, and there will be that gathering momentum. So
talking about investments, what we've seen for some time, for some years now, the big businesses who are doing very well in Sri Lanka, the Sri Lankan-owned businesses, they park their money outside of Sri Lanka for potential other reasons, because they actually earn from foreign nations, but that does not come exactly the way it should come into the country. Now, what's the steps taken there in order to build the confidence? Maybe they are not confident about the Sri Lankan economy, and that's why they are parking it elsewhere. What are the steps taken there?
You're absolutely right there, Mahieash. See, we have seen that in the recent past there has been a lot of speculation as to the rupee, and that has also encouraged or made some people hold back their dollars. Instead of converting it into rupees, they have held back. And those who want to import have rushed and imported, and some of them have imported what they require for the entire year already. So that has put further tension on the economy, and that's something that we want people to understand, not to do that, because especially in difficult times, if you become selfish and you are rocking the boat, that's not going to help anyone at any time. So you got to understand what the government is doing. We are doing our best to ensure that there is a sufficient element of stability, and to do that, all have to cooperate. We don't want to bring laws and browbeat people. After all, the exporters get a tax holiday. They don't have to pay any taxes because of the fact that we recognize that they are bringing export earnings which are necessary for the country. Now, if they bring it in or they don't bring it in, and if they bring it in and then don't convert, then they actually are doing a disservice to themselves as well and to the country. So the country that is giving them a tax holiday, saying, because you are exporting, we are not giving you taxes to pay, they're actually violating that particular principle also. So that's why we are encouraging them. Convert your dollars into rupees. You are making money already. You are doing export business. You are not in foreign exchange business. So convert the monies and make sure that you bring the stability as well. So I think more and more people are beginning to recognize that. And in time to come, I think once that recognition and that understanding becomes even greater, we would see greater stability in the external account as well.
Let's take a short commercial break. I am in conversation with the State Minister of Money and Capital Markets, Ajith Nivad Cabraal. We've been talking about the current status of the economy, the trajectory, what exactly can we expect as we move forward. Let's take a short commercial break. You're watching Get Real. We'll be right back. I'm in conversation with the Minister of State Minister of Money and Capital Markets and State Enterprise Reforms, Ajith Nivad Cabraal. So we've been talking about the trajectory of the current economy. You gave a very good explanation as to what the government is thinking and what the government is doing in order to get us out from where we are currently now. It is appreciative that you actually accepted the fact that we are in a difficult situation, but then it's not about where you are today, it's about where you get to. Now, everybody, the biggest news is like even in on our channel, we have a little bug on the corner which showcases the amount of a single dollar converting to a rupee. So now when you all gave, it was around when you all handed over back in 2015 when you were the governor, around, I think, 150 or
131.
30. So there you go. Now it has now fluctuated. It has come to the very the limit of around 200 rupees. Now this is creating news mainly because people don't understand what this is. I mean, if this is going up, is it helping the country, or is it actually a big problem? Now what I want to ask you is, what exactly is Sri Lanka trying to do by floating the rupee? I mean, does a lot of people think that we should be at a point where $1 equals 1 rupee? I mean, that would showcase the stability of the economy and all those kinds of things. What's the truth here? If you can explain to us.
It's like this, Mahieash. You see, the rupee value is something that everyone has a view about. Particularly if you are an exporter, you would want it to depreciate because then you will think, I'll get more rupees. If you're an importer, you want to pay as less rupees as possible to import your stuff. So then you have another view. So you want it to be strengthened. If you are a person who is working abroad and you are sending money to your relatives, you want it to depreciate so that your relatives will have more money in their hands. You see, if you are a person who is borrowing money, at the time that you are borrowing, you will probably like it to be depreciated so that you will get more rupees in your hand. But at the time that you are paying back, you want it to be appreciated. So each one has a view. And it can be a question of the amount of dollars that is in the market, the amount of dollars that are coming in. All these are functions of the value of the rupee. At the same time, the central bank also would have a view as to which way it should be moving. What is the value at which the optimum benefit could be got by the economy. Now, as you know, during the time that I was the governor, our depreciation was the lowest ever in the history of our country. And at that time, there was a very in the history of our country, when I mean after liberalization. So it was the lowest ever during the time of the post-liberalization period. Now, that kind of situation we didn't have after 2015. We had a rapid depreciation. In fact, we had a nearly 40% depreciation in the 5-year period, which was extraordinary depreciation, so that when we got the rupee back, it was around 182. Then, with all the tensions, we have seen it hovering around the 200 rupee mark against the dollar. And in my view, that is far too depreciated. And I would like to see it at a level which is a lot stronger than that. Now, that won't happen overnight. It could have been nurtured faster towards that goal that we had COVID not occurred and we had a steady inflow of dollars coming into the country. Now, that was to some extent disturbed, and now we are seeing the situation where we need to again recover, recoup, and then ensure that we get back to those norms once again. Now, that's a tough call. At the same time, we need to now get more and more non-debt instruments, because we have a debt situation as well. When I was the governor, you would have heard me saying on many occasions that economy is all about having different cushions in order to cushion certain shocks. So if you have space like a shock absorber in the car, if you fall into a rut, Mahieash, you don't feel it so much because you have the shock absorber. Now, what happened was in 2019, at the end, when we took the economy back, all those shock absorbers were not there. So at any time you fall into a rut, you feel it. So now our spaces are rather limited. So that's why we got to build spaces as well, build some cushions. So now at the moment we are doing that. When I think once we have a few of those cushions in place, it would have been faster had COVID not occurred. But I'm still confident that over the next 6 months or so, with careful planning and implementation, we would see those cushions building up.
In order to understand that a little bit further, what we need, like people need to understand what the government's thinking in terms of what this economy is. How does this government define this economy? Is this going to be an export-oriented economy, or is this going to be, self-sufficient? Because we hear that a lot. And then, contrary to that, we see exports also taking place. Now, what exactly is the thinking here?
That's interesting. You see, the rupee value to a great extent depends on the inflows and outflows. Some can be exports. Some can be exports of services. Another can be like tourism, where you get where you get exports coming in an invisible form. Then it can be IT exports. So there are different types of inflows that you can have. At the same time, there are outflows. Now, if a person goes abroad and spends money. And that means, and you swipe your credit card when you go to Switzerland, Mahieash, or anywhere, you will find that there is outflow of dollars. So like that, there are so many transactions that take place. Now at the end result, if you, what we call the balance of payments, if you have an excess of dollars coming into the country rather than dollars going out, you will find that your rupee will gradually start strengthening. Now that's the type of economy that we would like to have, where we can give the option to people to do what they do best, but at the same time to have a gradual increase in the amount of dollars flowing into the country. Now that's one of the challenges that we are facing. So if we can get that going, like what we had in the past, pre-2015, we would probably find that the rupee will start strengthening. Then your rupee starts strengthening, your debt repayment becomes that much easier. Otherwise, you got to find dollars for your debt repayment, plus you have to find rupees to buy the dollars. And if the rupee has depreciated, then the amount of rupees that you have to spend will be much more. So that kind of a balance and an equation has to be always in the minds of all the economic planners. Now, unfortunately, we don't have enough spaces to deal with it as well as we would have wanted to, but we are gradually building it up, and I think by early next year we would have sufficient buffers that would enable us to do that. And I don't want to give a title to the type of economy, but I would like to say different people, let them do their economic stuff the way they feel best, but at the same time, as an overall, if we can have more dollars coming in than going out, then that will be the one.
Is that why we saw the president taking the decision of completely stopping imports of vehicles, luxury vehicles and all, and then also chemical fertilizer? Is the reason?
I think the reason for the first one that you mentioned, where we stopped the vehicle imports, was mainly to conserve the dollars, because when you do have one of your key elements of inflows being disturbed, then you got to react to that, and then you have to make ends meet, and then you will reduce that. The second decision was different. The second was a response to the clamor that we have had for a long period of time, that we bring in organic type of activities into the country, which would mean that we will not have the poisonous substances that goes into the soil as well as to our food.
That actually gets a sizable amount saved within the country as well.
That will save around $350 million a year, but the intention is not necessarily the saving of the dollars, but that is as a policy measure, where we are attempting to bring in more healthy standard of food and healthy standard of cultivation, which would mean that the country will go into a better health standard as well. As you know, we have about 150,000 people who are suffering from kidney disease.
Of course.
And we have about 10,000 people dying. And once you get the kidney disease, there is a very little chance that you can recover. So these were all social problems that we had encountered, and there was no real way in which it was being tackled. So the president took a very bold decision. I know it has certain controversies attached to it.
I do also honestly think that was the right way forward, because despite the fact that a lot of people have different arguments, it's mainly because due to fear. They don't know how the market will turn up to be. So the moment we address those issues, they will also be on board. I want to go and ask you about, you talked about tourism. Now, tourism is a main income earner in Sri Lanka right now. Now, not happening. You said it came to zero. This actually has taught us a lesson, saying don't put all your eggs in one basket. Because tourism should not be the only income earner, textile and a lot of others should be. Now, since the world is changing, how has the government's thinking also improved? Instead of utilizing these normal methods of bringing in foreign investment to this country, what are the avenues that the government is looking at? These could be new ventures Sri Lanka as a nation can go into, which we have never done before.
Let's put tourism in perspective. We are a $80 billion economy, of which around $4.5 billion is from tourism. So tourism accounts for about 5% of our GDP. So that's a substantial part. But as you quite rightly mentioned, that's not an overwhelming part that will cripple our entire economy. Certainly the people who are involved in that particular sector are very badly damaged, and we got to find solutions for that. And at the same time, if you take our amount of dollars that we earn from exporting our services as well as our goods, that's about $35 billion, out of which $4.5 billion is a substantial number. It's more than 10%. So in context, you can see tourism plays a very interesting and important part. Now, when you find that that is suddenly given a shock, and that becomes...
it was not like a small shock, but it's zero. Completely gone.
It's a big shock. Then you got to take some fairly heavy steps to deal with it. That's what the government did, and some were not very popular decisions, but you got to make ends meet. It's like suddenly you have two streams of incomes as a person, and you lose one of those streams. You will change your lifestyle. You have to, because otherwise you will go down under, Mahieash. So that was what the government did, and that was the right decision. But we got to get it back as fast as possible, because the investment that has been put into tourism is quite high. It's very high. In fact, the banks are exposed. It's not only those investors who have put in money. Our banking sector has a big exposure, about perhaps ₹1 trillion exposure to tourism when you take all the types of investments that are there. So
and lots of investments were coming also. A lot of hotels were going up and now stopped. So you can see it can damage quite significantly unless we take some steps. That's why we got to reopen as fast as possible. Now, if you take certain countries like the US, you would find that they are getting back to tourism as fast as possible. Even Sri Lanka, you would have noticed in the brief period that we had from the second lockdown to the third lockdown, second wave to the third wave, there was a gradual upturn in tourism, not only foreign tourists. There was a local tourists as well. Now, if we encourage at least the local tourists to move about and have that tourism plant being effectively utilized, then you would find, Mahieash, that the tourism can limp back. I'm not saying it will come back to normal, but it will limp back at least to make ends meet and to have a decent cash flow. But the real result would only come once we open out the borders. So once we open out the borders, after we have also been vaccinated and so on, and I know that that vaccination program is now going pretty fast. If we have that in place, you would find that tourism can start up again. Now, the important point there for us to recognize is a large chunk of our economy of that nature cannot be recreated very quickly. We can certainly open out new areas. Now we are doing that with new areas, the pharmaceutical sector being opened out. But the pharmaceuticals cannot replace tourism in the short term. Of course.
It can only be a long-term journey where you have more and more items coming into the economy.
Let's take a short commercial break. A very interesting conversation with regard to our economy. You need to do a little bit of research and exactly find the correct details rather than believing everything on social media, thinking that we are trying to be another Zimbabwe. Like the opposition says, it ain't the case, like the minister explained. Let's take a short commercial break. You're watching Get Real. I'm in conversation with the State Minister of Money and Capital Markets and State Enterprise Reforms, Ajith Nivad Cabraal. So we've been talking about, the economy, the rupee appreciation, depreciation, and what the impact on that is. The next solution, the only solution that exists, is that getting more investments into this country and opening this economy in a manner that Sri Lanka benefits, not foreign countries come and take everything dry and go back to their homes, but for us to benefit from that as well. Now, one of the great things, in my opinion, what I've seen is what President Mahindra Rajapaksa did in order to bring China and to create this port city, which never existed existed. It's an additional asset created, it rose from the sea. We never sold it to another country or anything of that sort. It never existed. It was created. Now the challenge has come to selling the idea of Port City to the world, even to our own investors. You have started with one of the other things that you all have been doing is the investor forums, which we saw very recently. The president, you were there, and you all addressed issues concerning Sri Lanka. How is Port City is going to be crucial to Sri Lanka's economy, and how do you see that being contributed in the future?
As you see, Sri Lanka has around 1,340 kilometers of coastal area. Now, out of that coastal area, there was a small selection to site this 269 hectares, which is just 2.69 square kilometers, and attach it to Colombo. Now, why it was done is because Colombo has the greatest commercial value. So now we have it in place. There is a city, we can see it, we can go there and all that. But now we got to make the maximum use of that. We got to make sure that it can truly be an international type of a city, like what you're seeing here, where you have people coming here and making it their destination of choice to do business. That's why if you see the law was structured to provide the service that will originate from the port city to be at the highest element that you can find in the world. So we are competing not with cities in Sri Lanka. We are competing with the Singapores, the Dubais, the best commercial cities of the world. Now, if we can compete and make it a preferred destination for people to come and do business, you would find that will create enormous opportunities for business to occur here.
That's a really good idea. It should be done. But looking at everything that is happening in terms of our thinking, our laws, our cumbersome processes, we're not there yet. We're not even close to that.
We are certainly not close. As you know, we are doing business, we are right down.
Yeah.
But this gives us opportunity where you have a single window. Now, this whole concept of this law, Mahieash, was that we'll have a single window from which all the services could be derived from. So that's the promise that we are holding out to investors who are coming here. You don't need to rustify. You can come to the commission and get your job done. So now that kind of approach, if we get it right, we got to get it right. It's not going to be easy. I'm not in any way saying that it's going to be done tomorrow. Proper set of people must be there. They have to implement it. If they get that right, then we can compete. That's why I've been very consciously advocating that the best people who can run these establishments are there. They have the energy, they have the drive, they have the vision to do that. And if we can do that, then we can truly make the port city center of the world. Now that's a challenge. So instead of getting down to the 99th position in the doing business indicator, we must be right on top there in the first 2 or 3. If we are in the first 2 or 3 and then we can compete effectively, we would find that will have enormous benefits for Sri Lanka.
How do we get there? What exactly should be what we need to do right now?
We got to get it right. That is what it is. We got people who can get it right. We have got it right on many occasions. It's just that we have not had the consistency and developed that.
That's exactly my next question to you now. If by any chance, touch wood, if you all lose the election in 2024 or 2025, and the new government comes, and we saw this in 2015, scrapped the Port City project, went away, laws are not in place to address issues like the Port City, a project that is for the next 30, 40, 50 years, to be in place just as it is. So that could create a lot. Like we see in America, we see in Australia, governments change, policies don't change the way the government changes. Here it's the opposite.
Yeah. Of course, if you take some of those advanced countries that you mentioned, they also went through a period where they had a $4,000, $5,000 per capita incomes, during which time there was this seesawing of policies. But once you reach $60,000, $70,000 per capita incomes, Mahieash, generally the policies become stable. I'm not giving that as an excuse, but I have seen this happening in so many countries which are on that path of development. This is just, normally this happens. That's why you need a steady, firm, consistent leadership for some time. Now, Mahinda Rajapaksa had that. he was there as president for 9 years. Had he had the next 5 years also, most probably a lot of these changes would have occurred, and then we would have had a very stable position that would have been established. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. So I'm not crying about it, but what I'm saying is there was a lost opportunity there. Now we don't need to lose that opportunity again. I hope that the same consistency can be maintained. Sometimes consistency can be maintained with the same government, but at the same time, if by some chance even that doesn't happen, you got to ensure that people buy into those policies. People must see, okay, this is giving real benefit. Now, if you would have noticed that even after the time of President Mahindra Rajapaksa, the next government continued with certain policies. They continued with the highway projects. Although it was slower, they still continued. They didn't scrap those. They first, you remember them saying that,
but they changed
yeah, but still the policy, there was no pullback. Now, earlier they said, why do you want to have these highways? Are you going to eat them?
Yeah.
But once they came in, they recognized, and the people were behind.
Same thing for the port city.
Port
lots
city.
Of
Haho, you will remember.
Exactly.
There were a lot of haho. They stopped it, but they once again continued.
Now, that is... forget about the government and the local viewpoint of that. It is very much damaging Sri Lanka's image in the international market. China would have just pulled out that over, I think, billions of dollars they invested. They could have just said, sorry, okay, we are going to go back. And that opportunity would have lost. Thank God it was China, and due to the years of relationship that we have with them, and they understand, I think they understand better Sri Lankan politics than us.
It's rather embarrassing when you say that.
And they did this. What's your viewpoint? Like, what do you think we can actually harness some kind of benefit to the economy through this project? Where do you see that?
I see a tremendous potential. Actually, the way it has been worked out, in the first few years, we'll have an infusion of around $4 to $4.5 billion into our GDP. And at the same time, after the first 5 years, we should have a GDP contribution of around $15 billion. With
5 years.
After 5 years, because there will be a certain time, a gestation period to get it up and running. Now, these are all longer term projects because you're actually building a new city.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
So that's a tremendous task. Now, once those things occur, there will be more and more people who begin to realize the potential, begin to realize the benefits that they are getting, begin to realize how supportive it is of the overall economy. Then you will probably find that it will take root in a firm manner. But in that ensuing period, it's always the challenge to keep going. So hopefully the same government will prevail, and then those policies will prevail.
Something that we really hope for, and I mean, like everybody in this country, despite our political belief, we want Sri Lanka to shine in the world stage. There is a belief that all of us share, and I think high time we work towards that. Put this petty politics aside and actually embrace these, world-class policies that could actually get us there. Minister of Money and Capital Markets, Mr. Ajith Nivad Cabraal, thank you very much for being here. It was a very eye-opening discussion. I really appreciate what you've been talking about. Hopefully we get to sit down again and have another chat about Sri Lanka's economy in a better position.
I look forward to that too, Mahieash. Thank you very much.
All right, well, that's all the time we have for you tonight. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you again next Monday with another edition of Get Real. Make sure that you stay safe, stay positive, and test negative. I'll see you next time. Good night.